Hi everyone, I hope you're very well. This is episode 8, season 2 of the Shop Stool Podcast. You may notice we're starting the show off a bit different today, and that's because unfortunately we've had to say goodbye to one of our co-hosts. Jordan Crawford won't be on the show for the rest of the season. Unfortunately, we've had to go our separate ways. On perfectly good terms though, we just aren't able to continue on our current schedule. So from Joey and I, mate, we wish you all the best. However, we do have a new co-host joining the show, someone you might already know. He was on episode 20 in season 1, and he's a very successful woodworker and entrepreneur. We had a great show back then, so the fit seemed perfect. I'd like to officially welcome Bryan Cush to the show, this time not as a guest, but as a co-host. Bryan, how are you?
Guys, I'm great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join the team. I'm obviously a big fan of the show, and it's good to be back in a slightly more permanent role.
Yeah, awesome.
And as always, we've got Mr. Joey Chalk from New Zealand. Joey, how's it going?
Very good, guys. How are you all?
And my name is Robin Lewis. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we've got a pretty cool topic to talk about. So I guess we'll get started with you, Bryan, just with a bit of an intro into who you are for anyone who doesn't know. And then I'm really keen to talk about this latest Instagram post that you put out with this environmental initiative. It's something that Joey and I talked about last night, and we're both very excited and interested in it. And I guess it would just be interesting to get your take on it, sort of what it's all about and what you plan on doing with it.
All right, I'll get the profile rundown out of the way, but basically I come from an architecture background. I'm Irish born, but I've been in Australia now for 15 years. I graduated from Melbourne University, worked in architecture for about 4 or 5 years, got a bit of burnout, decided that a desk job wasn't really quite what I had in mind for my career, so I started getting back to making things, started a workshop on the side, and gradually partitioned out of architecture, got a business grant and got my business going. So my business is 5 years full-time now. It's Sawdust Bureau.
Awesome.
Based in Melbourne, do work mainly in Australia, a little bit of international stuff depending on how the Aussie dollar is stacking up for foreign buyers, but only Australian timbers. I don't use any imported stuff. Bit of concrete, bit of steel, but timber is always the sort of the main focal point of my work. Kind of branching on from that, I've always sort of been interested from studying architecture in terms of trying to work out a building's carbon footprint, and it was taught pretty early in my university days, like how to calculate the entire sort of net carbon footprint of a building. So I thought, well, maybe I could start employing those ideas onto furniture. So I had always said Australian timbers, it's the easiest way to reduce the amount of energy required to get that product to me. And it's also, it's a different species from, like, eucalypts are available mainly in Australia. There's some obviously in South Africa and places like that, in America. But it is an Australian indigenous species, so it is of the place as well, which is kind of important to me in terms of design. I want to produce something that looks Australian, but also the knock-on effect is that it's using far less energy to produce that product. Yeah. So the idea behind the trees was obviously with the global climate strikes and things like that. Now I was trying to work out a small thing that I could do to my business to make it a little bit less bad for the environment, I suppose. And the fact that we're in the business of cutting down trees, I think we should also be in the business of putting them back up again.
Yeah, I think it's something I've been thinking about for probably 3 or 4 years, and something I've acknowledged to myself and pushed it back to the back of my brain because it's almost been, I didn't really have an answer, and I still don't really have an answer for where I stand, and that I know that I'm causing some of that problem because I'm using almost entirely imported species. And there is a problem here where I am in New Zealand. I can't get good furniture quality natives. It's just, I was just on the phone today trying to find some veneered plywood in Cowrie, and just, it doesn't exist. There's no one has it. And so, yes, I can use a bunch of different softwoods. We're really good at growing pine over here, but it's no furniture grade material. So for me, at the moment, I'm stuck with imported stuff, whether it comes from Australia or America. It doesn't really make too big a difference, I don't think. so I've always had it in the back of my mind that what can I be doing to do I stick with that imports, and then what do I do to offset that? And the idea had never actually crossed my mind that I should be planting trees, or that was the obvious that's the obvious solution. But I think, Brian, you actually haven't said what you were thinking yet, was that you're going to put some percentage of each job, I think, is it each job, and you're going to take that money and donate it to plant trees.
Yeah, like the figure that I've always had in my head was kind of 1%. You know, if you're trying to get people to really jump on board, it like we basically work for, you know, not that far above minimum wage, the guys that are doing it full time. So the idea of donating, I don't know, 20 or 30% of a job it's not going to fly. But you know, 1% is such a small figure, and there's obviously other charities and not-for-profits that have done that 1%. There's a soccer player in Europe who runs a not-for-profit called Common Goal, and he's trying to get other professional soccer players to donate 1%. Right. And obviously 1% of 500,000 euros a week is slightly bigger than what we can contribute, but I figure that most makers out there, 1% is achievable, you know, and 1% of a $3,000 piece equals 10 to 15 trees. And you've only used probably a third of a tree, maybe, by the time you take into account dressing, to create a rather large piece of furniture. So I just think it's an achievable thing. I've had a pretty good response, and a response globally as well. You know, a lot of Americans, Canadians. So I think it would be really good to just have more involvement with the outside community, obviously beyond my kind of group of Australian Melbourne-based makers, but to create a bit of a list of different not-for-profits that people can donate to. So not necessarily donate to one, because I obviously want to look at Australian reforestation. There's no point in a Canadian maker putting their money into the same project, but just to create a list, and people can choose and just commit to that 1%. And whether it's under an umbrella of, you know, some kind of name or brand, that we can all say that this is what we're doing.
That's a good idea. Right?
It's an easy thing to implement.
I did some quick Googling last night and found at least 2 non-for-profits who are planting trees, and it's something like $25 for a single tree, and I think it was $100 gets you a small grove, what they call a small grove. So I imagine it's going to be about 10.
That's in New Zealand, is it?
Yeah. And they're planting natives, and I mean, that's so simple. They've got a simple online, it's like 2 clicks and you've donated them $10, and it's so easy for me to do that. And it's like, kind of smack myself on the head, why haven't I been doing this for 10 years?
And then what happens to so that donation obviously goes to that company, they plant the trees. Do you have a way of following on from that?
I can. The one I looked at, you could. I think there was a bit of extra paperwork, and it will give a certificate and some kind of some kind of geotag type thing where you could actually zoom in and look at where your tree's planted and follow it that way. There was some way of identifying it. I didn't do the full reading, but and I think for large donations you can have a plaque put in front of the group of trees or whatever.
Not that it's about that, but I guess it's just nice to have some form of, this is what I've done. You know, I can put my gold star on my head and feel good.
I think there are a lot of makers out there that do it quietly and don't shout about it. And I don't want to be the person to sort of shout about it and say, this is what my business, and, you know, I'm doing things differently because I'm some environmental warrior, because I'm not. You know, I drive a car, I go on international holidays. But I just want it to become an industry standard. You know, I just want it to just be a simple thing that we can all do.
It just seems like such common sense to have any building company that uses timber should just be planting trees. It just makes 100% of sense.
I have been contacted by builders as well, and carpenters, which is really good. Obviously the use of plantation, sort of single species, is a bit of a problem in terms of biodiversity and things. So even if they're using plantation timber, you know, it's a commercial enterprise, so that plantation timber is going to be replaced by the same timber. But if their money can go into increasing diversity somewhere else, in a different forest or something, I just think it's a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest.
Yeah.
So just to elaborate on that, is the goal here to move away from the plantations altogether? So it's just not that single species. So are you just trying to create a new sort of a natural environment that we can then cut down at a later stage? So we're still going to, use the timber, but the idea is to not just have that single species pine as far as the eye can see.
I reckon I would be swaying more towards the whole, like there's a lot of farmers in Australia that are now reforesting their properties and moving away from like arable land and trying to bring back native species and a diverse range of native species. Plantation timber is obviously hugely important. But I think it's just about trying to achieve a balance between the two. Like in New Zealand, there's obviously been political moves and there are huge pine forests that people have put their retirement funds into and stocks and shares and all that kind of stuff that like kauri and rimu is not a thing. It's so slow growing that a plantation that you planted now is going to take 150 years, 200 years?
Well, 100 plus years to get to a point where you would say it's worth chopping it down. Yeah. So I think it's never going to be a commercially viable thing to say, we're going to plant rimu seedlings and then we're going to start milling that. But the idea of the plantation timber is fine, and obviously you're going to still have to import stuff from overseas because that's the reality of hardwoods in New Zealand. But eventually you will restore biodiversity and bring back rimu and Well, I should just clarify, like, I agree with you 100%, but rimu and kauri are both pines. Rimu's red pine, kauri is a version of pine, I forget exactly. So while kauri is the best timber you've ever put through a moulding machine or a milling, it just does exactly what you want it to do. At the end of the day, you can still put your fingernail into it and dent it. It's a bit like the Japanese using their soft cedars and stuff. Machines beautifully and they can do really nice work with it, but at the end of the day, it's not hard enough really for a tabletop or even, all the old villas here are made with kauri floorboards and all of them are just dented and scratched and just terrible. Like, it's I don't know why they did it. Well, I do, because they have these huge trees that they were just chopping down. So in terms of like high quality furniture, it's really difficult. There's a few native species here, but they either grow too slowly or they're not planted for harvesting or they're too small to harvest. And the pieces they grow in weird shapes, and so you can get some very hard natives. You just can't get any. You certainly couldn't get enough to make a dining table and chairs, and so it's just a really pain in the ass, really.
And that's why I was asking the question: are we putting these trees down to eventually become timber for furniture, or is this just to offset what we are taking out with the intent of these just going back to nature, so to speak?
I would say it's probably the offset factor. The carbon sink. One of the companies that I've looked at is trying to turn southeastern Australia into the largest carbon sink forest outside of any rainforest. So it's just about planting more trees, I think.
I think from my point of view, it's if I'm going to take some oak or ash from the States, I can't do anything about that happening in the States, but I can certainly plant 5 little seedlings for my one purchase of a tenth of a tree. So
even if it's the really small things like stabilizing soil, slowing down rainwater runoff, like there's so many other factors that come into it that it just makes sense to plant more trees.
Absolutely.
When I bought this house, and I was house hunting at the time, I almost bought a house on the outskirts of town. The area wasn't the greatest, which is why I ended up not going for it, but it was a 5 hectare, I can't remember, block, really big, and the house was right on the front. And between my wife and I, the goal was basically just to chop the block in half. The front half is ours, and the rest we just let go back to nature. So you just take that block and that you plant your natives, etc. And so in that process, I did a bit of research, and it's amazing how a lot of people are starting to do that. It's becoming quite a popular thing to buy a private piece of land and essentially give it back to nature. People who have grasses, native grasses in their yards, instead of continuously cutting it, which again is obviously there's a lot of carbon footprint in that, they just let the native grasses grow and they just give it back, so to speak.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a really cool
it is
idea.
it's a feed. Like there's a movement in Europe at the minute called seed bombs, and you can buy like these kind of compressed. It's a variety of wildflowers that are native to whichever region you're in, and just go and chuck them on council roundabouts and nature strips and things, and just try to increase that whole diversity, bring the bees back, and by not planting the same types of trees over and over again, you're not dealing with that canopy cover. And it's allowing smaller plants to grow. So it is just this real holistic thing. I think that it needs to go full circle. It can't just be about, cut down a Tasmanian oak tree, replant a Tasmanian oak tree in exactly the same spot. Yeah.
I guess when it becomes very second nature for people, and these conversations that we're having, clearly it is becoming more second nature for people, then it won't become a case of, as you say, I've pulled out a Vic Ash, I need to put in a Vic Ash. Your day-to-day will be offsetting that. And as soon as people become more aware to it, like when you plant native in your own yard, like I don't have a big block, but I can still do my little bit with that. When I plant native, the garden works. It just works because it's supposed to be there. So it's not
requires
so much
less water, less fertilizer.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And you think, well, why wasn't I doing this in the first place? Because this is low maintenance. So people are becoming more cottoned onto that. So it costs less, it works better, and then so people are just going to run with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right.
So moving forward, Bryan, then what's the next step then in this? Is there anything planned for this? Because I know you were talking about getting an initiative or getting a group of makers together. Is there a next step, or are you still making this up as you go?
It's kind of like, it's literally just something that came to me probably 2 or 3 days ago, and I just started Googling tree planting schemes. I think it'll probably develop. Like I will try to generate a web page, whether that's on my own website or on another site, of just it's like a resource guide nearly, ways for makers to manage their carbon footprint and different not-for-profits in their region that they can go to. But I think it would be really good to have it under one sort of umbrella that we can say we're all part of it.
So do you have a list of those organizations already?
I've started drafting one today,
Because I wouldn't mind putting some in the notes of this episode, just some links that people can go to. If they're listening to this and they're interested, we'll have some links in the show notes.
Yep. I will shoot them through to you.
I thought it'd be interesting to note, at least, not quite part of the same conversation, but in my Googlings last night, I found that New Zealand government, you never hear about these things, obviously, but our government at some point in the past had said they've got this initiative which they're planning to plant 1 billion trees by 2028, and they've got people trying to have people full-time walking hills planting trees, and they want to pay people $400 a day to walk and plant trees, and at the moment they just can't get people to do the job, which is outrageous. Presumably because people don't want to walk all day and plant trees. But for $400 a day, and all you have to do is walk around in nature, there's something like 17 available spots, like constantly. They just can't keep the positions full. And obviously if people aren't going and doing this job, then they're not going to hit that 1 billion tree mark that they're after. But I mean, I just think it's outrageous that they're putting the money into it, and there's just people just don't want to do it. So,
that is pretty crazy. I know in Australia the visa scheme here for travellers, I think it's under 30, is that you get a 12-month tourist visa, and you do 3 months of regional work, and you get an additional, I think it was either 3 or 6 months. So I don't know whether that covers things like tree planting or whether it only covers work on like commercial farms and things like that. But it would be an interesting thing to work out, because there is such a volume of backpackers coming through here. That seems to me to be a far better scheme than getting them to work for let's call it minimum wage, but it's usually slightly below it, picking apricots or apples or strawberries.
That's right, fruit pickers,
Yeah.
That's what this tree planting is aimed at, tourists coming in, and it just can't seem to get people to stick to it. So
that is mad. It sounds brilliant, walking around rural New Zealand planting trees.
Get fit, offset your carbon footprint. Well, sounds like a perfect scenario. And $400 a day is certainly not something to scoff at.
That's a good wage. I think most furniture makers aren't making $400 a day. So
hell no.
No.
So
talking of furniture making, Bryan, what are you working on at the moment?
I am working on a custom island bench, another one. With another built-in wine rack and a set of stools to match it. It's good. It's a repeat client. It's a nice job. He's given me a fair bit of freedom on it. I'm working with. I bought a batch of white mahogany, which is a New South Wales eucalypt that I've been working with on the last few projects. Really nice stuff. Super hard. Kind of looks like American oak. And I'm just kind of gradually working my way through the batch. I'd never seen it in any of the timber yards in Melbourne, so when I pulled it out of the rack, and I assumed it was American oak, and the timber yard owner said, no, eucalypt. And I was like, wow, I'll just take the whole thing. Awesome. So it's very unlike me. I usually just buy it per job and buy maybe 20% more, keep a few offcuts and work on that. But it's very unlike me to buy the whole lot. So
you say it's a repeat client. So is it going in the same house, presumably?
Same apartment, a retiree. He commissioned me originally to do one of my pinch benches with a ammunition shell as the leg.
Oh, yeah.
And then I've done a few other pieces for him since then. Yeah, it's good.
So do you find, as a secondary question, do you have like a target kind of client age, what they look like? Do you have a target or customer that generally you find them like in their 60s, or are they in their 20s? Or
I have tried to work out that demographic so many times. I look at the age of people visiting my website, the age of Instagram followers, the age of clients that I've had, and it is such a diverse range. Obviously, at a price point, you're kind of cutting out most people in their early to mid 20s. It's not really, but there's a lot of young entrepreneurs out there that make money in their mid 20s, and they want to buy nice things that last as opposed to just flashy things. I've had anywhere from late 20s to probably early 70s. Usually dual income, early 30s to mid 30s, I would say, is my standard. But it's always interesting. Whenever I sell a piece of furniture, I drop a pin on a map as well and see what suburbs I tend to sell in. And that's surprised me. Like in Melbourne, I don't know whether any of you guys know Melbourne, but Toorak is sort of Toorak and Malvern are the kind of real pricey areas. Kew, so it's sort of southeast. Right. I have sold bugger all there. Yeah. All of my stuff has kind of been more inner city, north and south side rather than inner east. But it's one of those things.
I have the same thing. The so-called quote-unquote posh area, I've sold like one thing in that area. So
I wonder if they'd be getting their stuff internationally.
I think they go to the high-end stores and buy the name stuff.
I did have one. My ex-soccer coach, who is a very well-off man, and he was due to commission me to do a dining table, which was going to be one of I think it was probably the second or third piece I'd ever made. And his wife obviously had concerns about me being a new maker, and I was like, well, I'm going to price it appropriately. You know, this is your chance to get a bargain. You're going to get something that's well made, local timbers. And she ended up going with an Italian table, and I'm like, okay, what's the design? Can you shoot? She goes, well, I just really wanted it because it was Italian. And I'm like, okay, and it was a really good lesson. You know, those are the attitudes you're up against from the start, and they will never be your customer.
Yeah, you can't do anything about that. If they just want the aesthetic of it being from Europe, then you're out of a job.
and they want to tell people that they bought it from Europe. So for me, I've kind of found the next tier, sort of the mid to high end, as opposed to the super high end, has kind of bought into my ideas for what a piece of furniture should represent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe,
So,
how about you?
yeah. Oh, what am I working on?
Yeah.
I don't know. Kitchens. More kitchens. Man, I'm over it. I just finished a video. I published a video for Once in a Blue Moon, which was this cool little ash extension table thing with steel legs. If I was if I had any skills on metalworking, I would have tried the legs myself, but that's not what I'm good at. I just do the design, get someone who knows what they're doing to do it, and I know it will be right.
How was the video received?
At the moment, it's performing like the worst video I've ever put out.
That intro. So for those of you who haven't watched the video, the beginning where you talk through the design process, I found amazing, brilliant. Like as someone who's interested in woodwork and who uses SketchUp, I really enjoyed that. But I did wonder how many of the people who are watching you just to watch the build process and watch, how many people you're going to lose along that way.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually looked at the actual statistics. I've just, on the little YouTube app, it just kind of says ranking like out of 10, how well is this video doing to two of your other videos, and it's like 9. So it's pretty terrible, but I don't really care at this point. It's just putting the videos out. So
interesting. Yeah,
I did.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I did just get finally just got an editor for my videos.
Oh,
so, cool. I have yet to see anything come back from him yet. Just a young guy, so I'm not entirely sure of his skill set. I just gave him some footage and said, edit, and let's see what happens. So hopefully it works out.
A local guy?
Yeah.
And is he going to get involved with the filming, or are you just...
No, I'm just going to... The plan is just to give him all my raw footage. He's going to cut it down into something like a rough cut, and then from that point, what I usually do is put my intro on, voiceover, and then as I voice over, I just trim everything out and tighten it up based on voiceover if I need to do that. So something he can't do that. So that should save me like kind of 3 hours on every video, I hope.
Yeah. So he'll send you the actual project, the full project back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's actually just what I've decided to do is just share a laptop, so that way everything just stays. So he just signs the laptop out from me, takes it away, edits, brings the laptop back, and then I can carry on. That's easier than trying to, stream footage, whatever you have to do, transfer footage and stuff. So
that's going to be very interesting. Whenever you listen to people talking about the point where they get an editor on board, they always say it's one of the most difficult but the best decision they make, because it frees them up, but it's so hard to let go of that creative control. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a difference in look and feel, but I'm just wanting to save time because I have not got enough hours in the day. So I'm just so snowed under with work coming in. It is insane. I think earlier this year, Brian, we kind of messaged backwards and forwards a little bit saying how quiet it was.
Yep.
And about 3 weeks after that, it just boomed and it hasn't stopped. And I don't know if it's changed for you at all that way, but
it's picked up here as well. Like usually winter to spring is pretty good, like coming up end of financial year and then moving into spring. Right. But no, it's busy at the minute, which is great.
Yeah. Cool. So, what are you doing, Robin?
Steam bending. Still working on that chair. The last time we talked, I think I had just started working on the legs, but I've now finished the 2 legs. I put out a picture on Instagram.
Yeah.
So it's 8 strips of Vic ash with a strip of Moreton Bay ash in the middle as just a dark contrast. So that's the thickness of the 2 legs. unbelievably strong once you've laminated them all together.
Yeah.
Unbelievably. So got those off the form. They're all pretty good to go. Cut the feet to size so they're sitting nicely. The next thing is going to be doing all the bends for the back, the slat, the support where you actually sit. So I've hit a bit of a roadblock, and I actually wanted to ask your guys' opinion on this. This is going to be quite an easy chair, a lounging chair. When you sit on a chair, if you consider these slats are going all the way from up on just below your head, all the way down to where your knees would come off.
Yeah.
The radius of that curve, is there like...
For your butt?
Yeah, where your butt goes. Is there like a standard that you would make that, or is there anything that I should be concerned about with that radius?
Yeah, all I can really say is that, you go to the beach and you sit down on the sand and you wiggle a little bit and it's perfect. It doesn't take much of a slight curve, I don't think, to kind of allow the human form to get comfy. I think when things are overly shaped, like a bucket seat, like in a racing car or something, it's comfortable but very restrictive at the same time. So
interesting, yeah.
I would just go for you can find a comfortable spot on a rocky outcrop. It doesn't take much to find that little hollow or something for a body to fit. So I would go for kind of gentle but obvious.
Yeah, because my concern is if I go too tight, then if the radius is too tight, then it's going to be uncomfortable because then you're sort of getting wedged in there. But if the radius is too big, then it just becomes one long curve, which I don't really want it to be. I want it to be a chair. It's not a scoop. Brian, any thoughts?
Welcome to the tricky world of chair design. Everybody has different opinions. There's like one school of science that says a chair, it's obviously slightly different because yours is an occasional chair, but a dining chair should not really be too curved, or it should be it should make you readjust your seating position. So you're not sat in the same position. It's not made to sit one way because it should be a generalized thing that should fit many different bodies, different seating angles, and it should cause you to move every few minutes. So that's obviously slightly different for a dining chair. But an occasional chair, you sort of want something to sink into. Is it going to be upholstered? You're going to have cushions in it?
No,
you're not.
It's just timber. Yeah.
Fun. Well, I don't know. Are you making it for you?
Yeah, it's just for me upstairs.
Yeah.
So look, if I get it wrong, lesson learned, not the end of the world. But it's just having never done a chair like this, I don't know what's going to work. And it's funny, when you said that, Joe, about sitting in the sand, I suddenly thought, well, there's a good idea. Let me go down to the beach, sit in the sand and
form it up. Make a sand mold and then just kind of template it off there. I mean, you could.
Yeah.
The thing that I've seen done is you stand sort of against a sheet of paper and get somebody to trace your spine angle.
Right.
And you kind of get your lumbar angle and all those kind of things. But yeah, make it really specific. Then get it to fit you. If it doesn't have to fit anybody else, then I wouldn't worry about it too much.
But the thing is, when you say get it to fit me, it's one thing to say, to sort of look at myself and go, my butts are about a 200 mil radius, or whatever it is. But when you're actually sitting in it, it's a different kettle of fish. So what I thought another way to do it, and this is what I was probably going to do this afternoon, is just go out to a furniture store and see if I can find something similar to get an idea.
Yeah, well, you got to have a reference point.
Yeah.
So
cool. So in other words, there's no standard. I've just got to work out whatever works.
There is science.
I found this amazing website that they just go into like all the science of the human body and ergonomics and all of that. So there's some amazing resources out there, but it's that particular curve. I just haven't been able to find anything.
I think it's maybe less about the curve and more about the angles, and the curve is like a vector between the angles.
So 100 degrees is apparently between the back and the seat. That 100 degrees is your standard angle.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously up to you to do whatever you like. But so if you think back when I did my bath, I just sat on the ground and put a plank up behind my back and just okay, no, that's too steep. Oh, that's too shallow, and here feels about right. I didn't care what the angle was. I just felt that on me, this was a nice lounging position to be in a bath. Also, that's what I figured, and that's what I ran with. That was the angle, and I mean, that's all. My suggestion would be to just find that angle that you find comfortable, and then you just gotta have to pick it and go with it, and then take note of it, make a pattern, and then next time you try it, you could say, well, I can adjust it this way or that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's what I'll be doing hopefully this week. I'm looking so forward to getting this one done, just because it's been something completely new. So, Bryan, this particular idea, the steam bending idea, I've never done it before. Joey and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and he said, try something new. I love steam bending. It's amazing. I've got all these projects lined up now just with steam bending. It's so much fun. Have you done any of it yourself, Bryan?
I am yet to try it. I've tried some bent lamb, but never steam bending. There are some issues because I only work with Australian species. There are only, I think, maybe 4 or 5 Australian species that bend really well. Some of them get too brittle. Most of the timber I get is kiln dried as well. So it's just
That's all I have as well. But I've found that I can still get a decent bend, although it's not Australian species. Because I can't get air dried oak, which is the ideal. But KD oak seam bends pretty bloody good. So I think you'd be surprised. I think there's a certain amount of wives' tale and a certain amount of truth in all those things. And depending on your radius that you're actually going for and the twist amount, I think you can probably get quite a good result out of KD stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've seen it done in a few different workshops, and I've seen Bern Chandley, which is an absolute pleasure to see him his jigs. And he kind of doesn't just bend in one direction. He can do a 2-directional bend, which is fantastic.
Oh right, I hadn't even thought of that.
So you'd have the back rail of a chair would go around your back and then come down to form part of the leg structure, I think.
Yep.
And one piece, and that is crazy. And that is one solid piece, and that's a whole different level, because I've done what Robin's doing at the moment, steam bend some strips, mold it, let it dry, take it out, and then glue it back together. That works really well. But doing that process in a solid bit of 30 by 30 or something, that is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the bending strip, what advantage are you finding doing the steam bending of the strips as opposed to bent lamb of the strips, Robin? Is it just that you're able to do less strips to achieve a tighter radius? Yeah,
that's pretty much it. So it's just about because I don't have anything to get. Well, I mean, I could get thinner strips with my thicknesser if I did. I think if you double side tape it to a board and run it through, you can get it thinner.
Yeah.
But instead of worrying about that, I can get it down to about 3 or 4 mil through the thicknesser. And you wouldn't be able to. Well, I wouldn't imagine you'd be able to just laminate that. You'd need to put something into it to soften.
I agree. My experience when I made my guitar was I was using maple, but I got down to about 3.5 mil for the guitar body, and there's no way that's going to bend around a guitar shape, which is why they have a dry heat bender. And so just that experience alone taught me that, okay, it's all very well to have thin strips, but to actually bend those thin strips and then have them stay there, steam gets them into the right shape, and glue then holds it there. And that's pretty much been my basis of why I've done that kind of thinner strips and steam bend and glue.
Yeah. When you say a dry heat bender, are you talking about the hot pipe?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
One of the strips that I did, when we talked last week, Joey, we were talking about. You were saying how you need to get it to that piping hot level where it's really hard to handle. There was one particular board that I put in, and when I cut the strip, it felt very loose, and it just felt particularly flexible. When that came out of the steam box, it felt like rope. It was unbelievable, and I was handling this thinking, this is what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah.
If you have the right species, air dried, etc., there was no resistance. It just bent
awesome.
around. Oh, it was amazing. And I thought if you're doing this right with the proper stuff, you could get away with 10, 15, 20 mil in this type of timber, no problem.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we should probably leave it there for today. To everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please go ahead and give it a rating on iTunes. That really helps us out. The Shop Stool Podcast is available on iTunes and most other podcast apps, as well as YouTube. My name is Robin Lewis. Joey and Brian, thanks for hanging out today. Take care, everyone, and we will see you in the next one.
See ya.
See you later.